One of Carl Rogers' three most core conditions is congruence. And I've come across quite a few people using this term in ways that don't really seem quite right. And I've been trying to understand why and to think of ways of explaining it differently. This is the result. Some psychotherapy and coaching courses are more closely linked from one year to the next. When I did my diploma, I studied at two different institutions, and that was challenging enough. So for people who study their 4, 5, 6, or even 7 levels at different places and with different tutors, I can see how easy it is for this to begin to lose some kind of integration. When that happens for me, I certainly tend to go back to the last time that I felt I did understand something and will try to hold on to that perception. I suspect that that's what's happening with these terms, empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. When we're taught something at level 2, which is effectively GCSE standard, we're given enough to get an understanding, but that might be a very simple version compared with what we would expect a student to learn at level 5, which is an undergraduate degree, or level 7, which is a master's degree. With counselling concepts, which are almost always quite complicated, it's worth challenging ourselves to make sure that we're not going back to an earlier definition and failing to build on it. I'll pick up on the others elsewhere if it's helpful, but for now I want to focus on congruence. The way in which it's being used by several people is as a synonym for authentic. And when they do so, they tend to put this in the context of a dialogue with their client. If someone says something that I find shocking, I'm likely to show a reaction. If the person then asks me if I was shocked, or another emotional reaction, and I say that I was, then I'm being authentic. If I deny it, then I am being inauthentic. As therapists, we've had it drummed into us that we should be open-minded and authentic. This doesn't mean to say that we should inhale sharply, clamp our hand over our mouth and stifle an expletive. That might be being authentic with a friend, but it wouldn't be particularly helpful to a client who might feel that they couldn't share any more with us for fear of our reaction. Denying our reaction, though, is lying, and lying is almost always inauthentic. So challenged by a client, we can own up to our natural reaction, but we should not be focusing on it in our work with them. Perhaps our training is wrong here. The better approach is perhaps to be open-minded and not inauthentic. I don't seek to deny my response, but I might hope to control it. And it's in the ability to control our response that the difference between authenticity and congruence seems to get confused. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I am not saying that being congruent is merely about controlling our responses. Rogers and his successors have clearly defined congruence as the state of being where an individual's sense of their ideal self aligns closely with that of their real self. The ideal self is what we could be, what our potential for the foreseeable future could be. Our real self is where we are right now. I am congruent if I have worked on myself, my values, my strengths, my thought processes, my responses, and so on, so that I am behaving as close as I can to the ideal that I could hope to be at. Most of us struggle to achieve this even after a lifetime of work. Therapists who are clearly congruent with their clients are extremely rare. They are probably the handful that we learn about: Carl Rogers, Gerard Egan, Manfred Ketz de Vries. Most of us will aspire to and be working on this all of our lives. To suggest that we are congruent with a client because we feel sad when they burst into tears isn't congruence, nor is it empathy. Think of some of the people other people describe as wise. Many of them have followed a spiritual, that's not the same as religious, path. that has often been alongside or after significant life challenges. Think of Rumi, the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, Elizabeth Gaskell, Bob Marley, Mother Teresa, Eckhart Tolle, Nelson Mandela, Paul Coelho, Maya Angelou, and so on. Their wisdom comes from a lifelong search, usually based on deep reflection and work on their responses to the events of their lives. Through this work, they have become congruent. Our ideal self and our real self are not just one thing. We each have different things that provoke us and things that trigger others, but not us. Our responses to gender, wealth, politics, domestic violence, sexual abuse, superstition, and even mental health are all different. When an uncontrollable and unobservable response happens, the hand over the mouth, raised eyebrows, and so on, it's a pretty strong indication that this is an area in which we might need to do some more work in order to become congruent. However, the response can be a much more subtle doubt in our mind, or even an avoidance as much as doing something. So, for example, my fear of my inability to control my own strength might lead me to avoid ever going anywhere close to where violence could occur. It's an area that I've done some work around. I understand some of its origins, and I can recognize the impact of this in my behavior and my life choices. However, I am incongruent around violence. My real self doesn't match where I would like to be, my ideal self. So I can listen to a client discuss their violence. I can try not to appear shocked, and I can be authentic in my response to that person if they call me out because something leaked out. But I am not congruent around violence. A friend of mine is a therapist who works with violent offenders within prisons. I could not. So I hope that helps put congruence into context. It's something that we aspire to. It's something that we devote our lives to working on achieving. It isn't just one thing. It's the sum of a lot of congruences around all the aspects of our life where we don't quite yet match our own ideal.